Here we are, another episode of The Next Fix, and today we've got Leah Johnson, no stranger to rock bottom moments and how to get yourself out of them. And she has already agreed to, before we hit record, to share with us, right? So I'm gonna hold her to the fire on that one. And so, Leah, I welcome you to the show. How are you living today?
Living great. It's a beautiful fall day here in Colorado. We were just talking about that.
Yeah,
Just
that crisp air.
Yeah, enjoying that moment.
Now, you're killing it, right? You're a mother and you're a fantastic person, but I imagine that it wasn't always the case. And so we want to know about that. You know, when was it that you found yourself kind of, digging yourself out of a hole, or maybe, looking around and thinking like, what the hell happened? And so we want to know what those moments in time look like for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that moment when you decide, like, I've hit rock bottom, like this is it. I either at my moment, I was going to successfully take my own life and then that was going to be it, or I changed everything and I got out of it and I grew. And so, I know that moment, and I still, as we talk about it, transport myself back to that experience of knowing, like, holy cow, like, had I been successful in taking my own life, like, what would that mean for my children? What would that mean for perpetuating cycles of generational trauma? And I would have only made it worse. So yeah, I know that moment.
When you say that, it's so interesting because I don't think I've ever heard it. I've never heard that phrase, successfully taking your own life. So I'm just letting you know, like, in my mind, what I'm interpreting that is that you were like actively, like suicidal, right? Is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, my journey starts, as a kid, and I had some childhood trauma, a sexual assault in college. All of those things that really added trauma to my life. And I found myself in trauma cycles. But my way that manifested was in this addiction to success. And I was driven by it. I had a 25-year career in politics, and the next success is what drove me. And I believed that is where I would find happiness. And that is what would cure the pain, like, no matter what. Like, and I'm not sure what success would have actually cured the pain, nothing of it, but it was like, I needed to be president of the moon in order to feel that pain. And obviously that was never going to happen, but I just kept going. And when those inevitable failures came in that success, I would fill the void with alcohol. And so it was a pretty vicious cycle for a long time. And, I found myself as a local elected official, being the youngest woman elected, having a baby while on city council, and then facing postpartum depression after that, on top of all of the things I was already facing. It was a pretty dark moment for me, for sure.
So tell me a little bit more about like what that looked like for you, like when you're hitting the sauce, right? Like, I've seen this like big politician's desk and you've got like a little hidden bottle of bourbon or something, but like, what did it look like in reality for you?
Well, for me, because the world we live in, there was other things to fill the void. So, I also had Klonopin to fill the days. So, benzos are terrible, horrible.
So bad.
Right. And so, like, I would take benzos during the day to make me perfectly functional. I was a highly functional person in that space. And I would, I'd also know my calendar to where, like, I had to show up and people would notice that I wasn't there. And so I would, mentally prepare my life around that. And a lot of my alcohol use too was around going to sleep. Like, I had anxiety about having anxiety about going to sleep, because when I would lay down, all that would run in my mind was I was a failure. I was a terrible person. I was a terrible mom. I wasn't enough. I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't a good enough elected official. I hadn't filled that void of success that I believed I needed to complete me. And so all that would run in my mind was how terrible of a person I was.
So you're killing it, highly functional all day, and you're checking off the boxes, right? And that's what keeps people in it for so long. Because if you check off enough boxes, it's okay to drink a liter of vodka, do whatever, down half a bottle of pills. And so you are doing that. You're checking off the boxes, but then when it's you and you're alone and you're just like, I've got to shut down this voice or voices. And my God, that's such a familiar feeling for myself. And I'm sure so many other people can identify with that, because that's when it gets the worst. Just you and that secret voice, on the outside, I'm imagining everybody was just like, oh, Leah's the best. Leah's the shit. I mean, she's going to be here tomorrow. It's going to be so great. And then you're laying down in bed and like shaking with, insecurity. And so, my gosh. And that's, I mean, the Clonopin and the booze and everything. Well, I guess how bad did it get? Or at what point did you turn that around, or did you like draw a line in the sand?
Well, yeah, I mean, and you can only hide. Like, people knew the tip of the iceberg, but nobody knew really what was going on underneath. And so, and over time, as public as I was, you could even see, like, I look at photos of myself then, and it's like I'm a shell of a human. Like, I was not even inhabiting my spirit was gone. Like, my eyes are devoid of any sort of energy that has anything. Like, I mean, compare and contrast to today, it's like it's a totally different person. In fact, my son, who's now 8, he'll look at photos of me, because he was really little when all of this was happening. So he doesn't remember. And he's like, who's that person? Like, he doesn't
Whoa.
even recognize me in photos, because it's been not just stopping the addictions, but it's been an energetic and spiritual transformation.
Was there like come to Jesus moment where you had been ousted and people are like, oh,
It was all my choice. So as I talked about at the beginning, at the very end, there were 2 really intentional suicide attempts. And it was fascinating because even after the first one, I found myself in a meeting with community leaders talking about running for higher office. Like still I was so like, I could not get myself out of that space. Like, I literally had woke up in convulsions because I took so many pills and alcohol, and it could have been successful. And
right.
a week later, I'm in a meeting with community leaders talking about running for higher office, because I like could not get myself out of that space, that was the thing that was going to make me better. And then another one after that. And I don't know, like, it just something. And my husband, who, God bless him, has just been, through all of that, was an incredible support person. And he finally just, I mean, and I'm sure he'd said it many times before, but it's like when you finally hear it, right? Like when it finally sinks in, like, I need to do something different. Like, this is not working. And yeah, it was, is this what you want your kids to live? Like, is this how you want your kids to live? Like, and he obviously knew the answer was no. And my mom had lived in, addiction. And I was just perpetuating those cycles of generational trauma and addiction for my kids. And again, had I been successful in taking my own life, not only would I perpetuate them, I was going to make it worse, you know?
Yeah.
And he said that to me and something hit. And that's when I literally looked at him and I said, call my dad. I want to go to rehab tonight. And speaking of Estes Park, my dad showed up. We drove up to the rehab facility just north, or just to the west of us
Wow.
here.
Yeah.
And, but I woke up the next morning in rehab, and all I felt was terror. Like, what had I done? If anyone finds out I'm here, my life is over. I mean, I was an elected official at that moment, and admitting that I wasn't okay felt like the biggest failure I had ever
Yeah.
encountered in my entire life. And so,
Whoa. Wait, so, and forgive me because I have a buddy of mine that works at the Estes Park Recovery Center. What is the name of it again?
it's Harmony. And
Harmony. Yes.
yeah.
Good friend of mine. Because Leah and I were talking about, I had lived in Estes Park, for people that don't know that, but yeah, Harmony. And so, yeah, he does good work up there. But so you called your dad, and so now you're in it, right? But then that initial fear, I mean, hits you like a truck, right? Like you just, because you stepped off the merry-go-round that you'd been on for so long. And in your mind, that was the only thing that was holding you together was this career. And so now you can't check off those boxes. You're no longer checking off the boxes. And what do you have then? And now looking back, of course, you're a mother and you are loyal, loyal to them, and you successfully broke that chain. So good on you for that. It's crazy. So was that it though? I mean, did you pull that off? Like that trip was awesome.
That was
That's
it.
awesome.
I always joke because there was only 2 weeks that people wouldn't notice that I was gone. Again, back to navigating my schedule and so I negotiated my time. And the woman was like, "This isn't how it works." I'm like, "Yes, it is. I got 2 weeks to get better, and we're gonna do this." and and I did. I went in. I was committed. You know, here's the thing, though. Like that moment, that was the moment that everything changed, right? But prior to that, there had been so many little things I'd also been doing to help me have the courage and the strength and the spirit and the connection to be able to say that. And, that journey was like this parallel journey, right? So you like vacillate between this depths of darkness where you're at in addiction and this voice inside of you that says, there's something more, there's something different. And, maybe for me, it was my spiritual journey. And so it and it had started, before that moment, 7 years before, but it was a slow, little by little process, right? And it was, some days I would meditate and some days I would connect with, for me, it's the divine feminine. And, I would connect with that energy and then I'd go months and not do it, right? But it was always there. And so it was those little things that I had done over that time that was like a parallel path that finally allowed me to say, and, a lot of it too was forgiving my mom for all of the things that we had. And once I was finally, and that spiritual journey was very much a part of that. And I would say that culmination, that turning point was really the point when I could, for the first time ever, say, I forgive you. And
Wow.
that
Okay.
was a big shift. So it was, it's not just,
Sure.
there's
It's
so
never
many
instantaneous.
layers to all of this.
Right. People think that it's instantaneous. It's really not. And because it's the culmination of a massive decision, as you had pointed out, but it's also this breadcrumb trail that you can't connect. You can't connect those dots until you're past it. And then you're like, oh, wow. I do want to know what did it just because I identify with it wholeheartedly is that your mother, is she currently in addiction? What did that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, so my mom passed away 12 years ago. And so and she never actually drank, but she certainly was influenced. I really come to the space of honoring her, right? Like she lived through her own challenges, had her own trauma. Addiction was certainly part of her childhood and growing up. And so she was responding to that really the best she could with the tools that she had. And at some point that's all any of us are doing, right? And so, I at this point, I have nothing but grace for her. And, it was hard. And she was responding to trauma in her own way. And her way was that we had to prove ourselves. Like we had to be the most successful ever. Right. And so that foundation was laid in me early. And, I embodied it then. Like it became me. But also, then at some point, we're adults. And I was making choices too that, again, we're perpetuating those cycles of trauma. And so, it wasn't a great relationship when she was in human form, but I would say that's the beautiful thing about healing is you get the opportunity to redefine what it is for you. And so, since she's passed away, it's been a long journey and I've certainly gone from a space of having really intense emotions about her to where now
Yeah.
it's beauty and grace and love. And she's around us and she's in us and she's in my children and she's in my parenting. And, every time I say I love you to my kids, it's her too. And we're in it together.
I bring that up is a loaded question because my mother is still an active addiction. And so, um, I have an 18-month-old son, and my wife she doesn't know my mother. And she's like, oh, what about his grandma? And I haven't gotten to the point that you have mentioned, the point of grace and the forgiveness. And here she is still alive. However, it's threatening. She sent me to jail for trying to cut her head off, and she accused me of murder. And so attempted murder. And so it's a murky, it's a murky spot. And I look at you and I praise you. And I want you to know that I can see that the forgiveness is sound in you. And, there's a bit of me, envious, that you, are at such a beautiful point with your mother. And even though it didn't happen while she was in human form, as you pointed out, that's really it's so cool. It's so cool. And then you can see her inside your parenting and in your kids. What an amazing transformation of trauma, right? And that's a very cool thing. So now, did the political career, did you truly pull it off in 2 weeks and get back into the political career? And did nobody know? What about now?
No.
I mean,
Yeah, so there's a detail in there that's important to the story. No, so in rehab, I wrote my press release to withdraw from my reelection campaign. So I would say that's why I went to rehab. I mean, once I did that, alcohol, I'm fine. It was so much of filler, a secondary addiction. Like I walked out of there, on a Thursday, I sent that press release on, Friday afternoon, because that's when you send news that you don't really want anyone to. If you know anything about politics,
I
they
will
said the
write
juicy
that
stuff
down.
on Friday afternoon. And I sent it, and that was that. I withdrew, and no, I shouldn't say that as that. It's still, so at that point, I said I wasn't going away. I was just repurposing. So I stepped back from the very public facing aspect of politics, but I was still engaged for another 5 years after that, in the behind the scenes thing, because like the process of letting go of that addiction was so intense that it still was it was my identity. It had been who I was since I was literally 14 years old. And I mean, up until a year and a half ago, every November since I was 14, I had been part of something that was on a ballot. And so it was who I was. I didn't know who I was without it.
Yeah.
So I had to figure that out and redefine it. And a big part of that was, in 2022, I wrote my first book, which is called Finding Fantastic Joy. And it tells this whole story
Yeah.
in a way that's what I realized is I had spent an entire career building advocacy campaigns for everything else and everyone else but myself. And so how do I spin that being a politician?
Yeah.
How do I spin that and create an advocacy campaign for me? And so that was what Finding Fantastic Joy was about, is taking that story and learning how to build that advocacy campaign for me. But the interesting things about writing a book is it's a really point in time moment, right? And so even now I've evolved so much, but that was really the beginning of the end for politics. It really gave me the permission to find something different that my soul was really called to. And so from there, I started leading retreats in Teotihuacan, Mexico, which is where I had gone prior. Now it's been 14 years ago. That really cracked open my experience and my spiritual connection. And so I started leading retreats. And then for me, interestingly enough, my mom was an artist. And I've always been creative, and I've always used creativity to process my trauma. So I started leaning into that and using that as my healing. And that's what I do today. So I'm an artist, author, and spiritual mentor.
Right. And so just to make sure I'm capturing it correctly, the primary, as you had mentioned, the primary addiction was success. And that was being manifested in your life through political activity since the age of 14. But it was that press release and you stepping off of the political merry-go-round, and then the alcohol vanished, right? And then so then that's so wild. And now, did you suspect that before you had pulled the trigger on your withdrawal? I mean, is that something that maybe you discovered in that very brief recovery, visit? Like, did you say, okay, once I pull out of politics, this is going to be you didn't recognize that?
I don't think I had those words.
Okay.
That was 2019, and I wrote the book in 2021-ish, right? So it took that long, year and a half, to really like marinate and process, like, whoa, like the things I was doing, the decisions I was making were so rooted in that like overwhelming need to prove something. And it didn't even, I mean, it didn't go away even after that, right? Like I still stuck with it for because this need to prove something. It was overwhelming. And also the idea that that's where my worth came from. Like my worth and my ability to be loved and valued, like it took a long time for me to understand, like that doesn't come from the external world. That doesn't come from awards or getting elected or even the accomplishments that I was getting in politics. It came from what was inside of me. And I really came to understand, like, I have this deep desire to change the world, whatever that also means, right? And what I came to understand, though, is I couldn't help heal the collective trauma if I didn't heal my own trauma first. And I had to lean into that. And then whatever my life looked like, then whatever my work looked like, it was coming from within me, not being driven from outside of me.
Right. Now, is that like the kind of revelation that you cultivate in the retreats?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think so much of our society is based in this idea of what success looks like, right? And, quitting a successful political career. And by the end, then even I was partner in a consulting firm and, did all the things. And I just said, I quit. I'm out. I'm leaving it behind. I'm going to go be an artist and move to Mexico for 3 months. Literally did that. And people thought I lost my mind. Like, they're like, what is wrong with this woman? And the thing is, I found it. Like I found myself. I found it. And it wasn't in this idea of what we believe success is. It was recreating what success meant for me, not when somebody externally was telling me what it was. So
the recognition of value, right? We so lazily take the labels of value and slap it onto whatever we're doing, whether it be a career or a certain amount of income or the car we drive. It's just a lazy way to put the value of our life together like that, from all these external markers. And they're just relentless. They're countless, right? They're all over the place. And so here you are, a person who had all of those very, like people imagine, oh man, I would love to be a successful politician. And man, there's probably so many people that thought you just had this lucky, and she's so lucky, and look at her life. And it's so, it's so, valuable. And then truly the real marker of value is from within. And you started to figure that out and put it together in your life, accurately, not from, what either social media or your mom said or whatever it was. You're just like starting to really create a very truthful picture of what value looks like for yourself. And it's being an artist, helping other people, and being in Mexico. So amazing. And so what happens in these retreats? Maybe if you want to go back to that initial 3 months, what did you start doing, or how did you start putting it together? Or I guess what goes on?
Yeah. So again, I've been going there for 14 years, and I even led retreats before I fully quit politics. So I kind of for a while had one foot in one world and another foot in another world. But about a year ago, that was it. I put the stake in the ground and I'm like, I'm out. I'm quitting. And my family, we moved to Mexico for 3 months and lived in the small Mexican village. And it's really cool. My kids go to a dual
What
immersion.
did your husband say about that?
He was in, like I said, God bless him. He's incredibly supportive on this entire journey. So, and my kids go to a dual immersion school. So we got to put them in the village school. And so, it was just a really rich experience. But I had spent a lot of time there before, having led the retreats and been on, and so we have friends and connections within the village that made it. It was one of those opportunities that presented itself that, just unfolds, right? And when you lean into the unfolding and allow it to be what it is and receive it, it's really quite powerful.
Yeah.
I was talking about some of this before, but what I really discovered when we were living there was the manufactured disconnection. You kind of were touching on it, like
Right.
between value and
I like the way you put it.
yeah. But this manufactured disconnection that we have created in the United States, and, it seems like our lives are easier. Like you can run through a fast food restaurant or you can do all this, but that ease has actually, at least for me, created a disconnection with just the basic aspects of living. And that was what was so beautiful about living there. Every day wake up and you'd go to the chicken shop and the vegetable stand and the bread store and, or, the bakery. And not only that, but so I had this connection with each of the things that were literally nourishing us. And then, but I also had connection with those people like every day. And I mean, it seems so small, but it was so powerful because it's so different than, going to the grocery store every 10 days here in the United States. And it's just, there was a connection to our basic aspects of living that really amplified this is what it's about. And there's a quote from Saint Teresa of Avila, who she says, God is among the pots and pans. And, that was it. We were living it. And
There's a quote that was like eating me at me. I'm wanting to say it so bad. I'm glad you said a quote because it made me think of, chop wood, carry water,
yeah,
find enlightenment, then chop wood and carry water. And it was like, it's like you start off simple and you're doing, some types of what at the time seems like simplistic tasks and you might kind of hate them. And then you go through a journey and you gain wisdom, you learn things, you go through challenges, you make it through, and then you find yourself kind of back at the beginning, but with a different perspective. And so what an amazing way to be. That's outstanding. And I do agree with you. Like it's tough when I see people, when I hear about people just struggling because they're juggling that manufactured, what was it? Manufactured
disconnection.
disconnection. They're just up against it all day with the social media and everything is at them. The phone's ringing, right? It's like it doesn't stop. And so they don't get a moment to really search or enjoy or evaluate like what's actually going on that matters. So but that's awesome. And so, so your kids, what is a dual immersion? What does that mean?
So they go to school half the time in Spanish and half the time in English. And so my daughter, who's now in 6th grade, is virtually bilingual. And it's super cool. And I'm very jealous because my Spanish is, I put a good effort in, but she's always like, Mom, your accent is terrible. And
You're embarrassing me with
yeah,
this.
pretty much. Well, you'll learn. Your child will grow up and then you will be an embarrassment. Just wait. And no, it was great. And I also laughed too, because in the village, it was like really well known. Like, just talk to the little girl. The mom's Spanish isn't that great. So
That's
yeah.
awesome.
But
Yeah,
no, it's so cool for her to have that skill set.
my little boy, what we were talking about, he's 18 months and his mother is Filipino and we're in Florida. So there's a lot of Spanish in school. And so he hasn't begun speaking yet. And so he's got it from all these angles. And I'm so curious as to how it's going to end up, And so it's very interesting language, but I imagine it's hard for him because he's hearing like 10 different words for chair and whatever.
No, he'll little brains, like they soak that up and then you'll be amazed. It's so crazy. It's so cool.
Now I want to know more about the retreat though,
Yeah.
like what you're doing with people. Now you lead these retreats and say, I'm like, all right, I'm down. What happens? What do we do? What is it like?
Yeah, so the ones I have been leading in Teotihuacan. So Teotihuacan is the ancient Toltec pyramids that are outside Mexico City, about 45 minutes. And so you actually really beautifully said it, like, we don't give ourselves the time to even stop and reflect. And so I think at its core, that's what this is about, right? Like literally taking time to get to know yourself. I mean, that's something we struggle with in our busy lives that we live here in the United States, especially. Like, it's just finding that time to connect with yourself. And so, but we spend time in and around the pyramids themselves, accessing that energy. So all of my retreats are based in a concept called intentional creativity, which is this idea that if we are intentional about creating, it creates access to the divinity both in yourself and a higher power, right? And you know, I never, as far as like a higher power, it's what is your higher power, like, and I always say it's just a connection through your heart, whatever that is for you. That's beautiful and powerful, and coming through your heart is where it impacts your entire physical being, right? And so, but it's connecting to that higher power, and then that is also within you, right? And so we do creative prompts, we paint every evening, intentionally processing what we experience during the day while living in or being in that energetic space of Teo and the amazing ancestral energy and all of the things that come with that space. We do a day trip into Mexico City to see Frida Kahlo's house, which is, she is the mother of intentional creativity. I mean, she literally processed her trauma through creativity in the most public way possible, which is just beautiful. And also then the Tilma of Guadalupe. And if folks don't know the story of Guadalupe, I highly recommend you look it up. But
A little bit more. Guadalupe.
yeah, so Our Lady of Guadalupe, the Tilma hangs. It's a 500-year-old apparition of Mary, or the Aztec version of the Great Mother. And so it's a beautiful story of faith, and the message she gave when she appeared 500 years ago to the humble Aztec man Juan Diego was, "Who am I but not your mother? Bring me your burdens, bring me your pain, and she'll acclimatize it. She will make it better." And so we go to that site in Mexico City. And so, yeah, it's a profoundly spiritual experience. It's accessing the creativity that is in you. The Toltecs believe that we're all dreaming our own realities, right? And so you get the opportunity to lean into that dream and then take it further. That's how I live my life. I mean, intentionally, like, manifesting is one of these things that gets thrown around. I'm like, man, you can't just like say something and hope it's so. Like, it's got to be an intentional process, right? It's a co-creation. And so, I mean, that's about healing and recovery too, right? Like, you
Yeah.
have to make the decision one way or another that you're in. And I found that when I commit, and when I quit my career and I had no idea what I was going to do, and I'm like, I'm going to be an author and an artist and I'm going to do this. But if you lean in and trust, and I mean, there's a lot of work. I do a lot of behind the scenes things. I did a TED Talk just recently, and it was a lot of work to get that. Things don't just appear, you have to work for them. But I find that when I intentionally put something out there that I want to create, get the opportunity to co-create with her.
So you go on the retreat and you're in an environment and you let that ancient and historical creativity and devotion and things like that kind of wash over you. And then after winding down and experiencing that, you kind of soaking that in, and then it's time to exercise it, and you give them the space, and you intentionally create, like, together, right?
Yeah.
And that's nice.
Well, so here, I know that some of this will be audio, so you won't be able to see it, but I'm still going to show you anyway. I have one right here that I just painted at my last retreat. So you can kind of see,
Okay.
like,
Nice.
it's just the energetic.
Now, this is just my logical brain. Like, how long did it take you to do that? Which is such a weird question to ask about art. I understand, but
Well, this one was like the whole week. So it was like the process. So every day, every evening, we go back and we put the energy of, maybe it's releasing things from the day that were super heavy that came up for you, like old traumas or old things. And you put those in, alchemizing it into creativity, or things came up that were amazing and you were grateful, or you felt an overwhelming love. Like putting those intentions into the painting is really like that's the process, and using creativity as the alchemy to create
yeah.
the healing, right?
What an amazing life that you have built and the life that you had before. I mean, it's like cinematic, really. It's like a very, this is could be legitimately turned into a movie, and I like it. But it's what an awesome thing to do. And now your kids, um, being a new father myself, I mean, do you have an idea of like how you might approach those conversations when it comes to, I don't know, substance abuse or, like what do you feel other than your own actions is going to be the way that you break those generational chains?
Well, I mean, I think for children, the most important thing you can do is demonstrate, right?
Ah,
Because they imitate. I can say all these things, but what I do, how I show up every day, how I lean into patience, lean into love, lean into those spaces, um, and also lean into not being perfect. Like that is so important for me because like I lived in this idea of perfection, right? Like I had to be perfect. And so what's even more important to me about raising my kids is saying I'm sorry. And like cuz I lose my, we're parents and I I lose my patience and I'm like, just pick up your socks, please. Finally. But I mean, all joking aside, like we get in those moments, but it's not that we don't have those moments as humans, but it's honoring that I'm human and I'm not going to do it perfect. And, my daughter is now in middle school and she's leaning into a whole bunch of life things that are hard about growing up. And it's just being honest with her about the experience, but also listening and
yeah.
asking lots of questions. I really, one of the things, actually, just this week, I was an author in a collective book that came out on. We made Amazon bestseller. Yay. But it's called Healing Curious Humans. And it was 20 healers and humans who told their healing story, but leaning into that idea of curiosity. And I think when we lean into that idea of curiosity as healing, it allows the nimbleness to be like, oh, my story can change and I'm not perfect and I can grow. And who I was 7 years ago is not who I am now in any shape or form, right? And being that beautiful transformation is, I think, as a parent, what I try to lean into the most. But also, like, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I
I love
definitively
what
don't have my shit together.
I speak a lot to curiosity because I believe it is the divine speaking to us. I say that because what makes you curious isn't what makes me curious. So where does that come from? And I believe it comes from the unique message that our divine creator is telling us. And whatever anybody wants to label their divine creator, totally cool. But there's something better, bigger, and whatever than you, and it's talking. And so curiosity is what I can tell is present in us from childhood all the way through the entire journey. And so there's a lot of like little hidden nuggets in there. So what makes you curious is to me like it's a magnificent place to start where if you want to make yourself better or you want to heal, like start with what makes you curious in the first place. And I think that if interpreted correctly, it can lead to a lot of really, really cool stuff, either be breakthroughs or, a new endeavor or a new vocation like yourself, authoring an art, like not politics, complete shift, paradigm shift, right? That is so cool. And so, all right, Leah, we're getting to the end here. I want to know where can
Curiosity
people
and
find?
creativity. I gotta just put that in there right there. Like those are two things that are innately in us when we come into this world. And they get kind of squashed out of us because we're told there's all these rules. But lean into what that means for you. And it allows that definition for spirituality. It allows that definition for healing. Like, it changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Curiosity and creativity, which is, I believe, an excellent combination and a very great, it's great work that you're doing. It's amazing. And I think that, yeah, you've broken some generational chains. And I can say that there's really nothing more nobler than that. Right. And so on that note, though, Leah, tell everybody, where can they find you? And of course, I'll put it in print, but like, explain, they want to be on a retreat, they want to buy the book, whatever it is, where can they get more of you?
Yeah. Well, my website is findingfantasticjoy.com. You can find out about retreats and all of that stuff there. My artwork is there as well. And then, I mean, I'm on Instagram at Finding Fantastic Joy, Facebook, all of it, LinkedIn, Leah Johnson, all the things. So.
Yeah, I'll have that all lined up for everybody. But you've been a magnificent guest. Thank you so much, Leah. I'll keep doing what you're doing. All right, it's been another episode of The Next Fix, y'all.